Hi and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to talk about something that's rarely mentioned or discussed in music education: breathing. The clip you just saw was taken from a gig at a fairly typical rock venue. It was summer, it was a full house, and typically for the UK there's no air conditioning. Air conditioning isn't a thing over here, unfortunately. Not many venues have it, and even when they do, the management are too tight to turn it on. It was hot and very humid that day, and by the end of the first set the audience had used up most of the oxygen in the room. And I was definitely starting to feel it. My focus and concentration had gone, despite the fact it was very simple material that I was very familiar with and well rehearsed. I was struggling to remember what was supposed to be happening next. The level of my improvisation suffered too. Needless to say, as soon as that set was over, I was out the door to grab some fresh air. Now, although this is quite an extreme example, it's not at all atypical of what musicians have to deal with all the time. And it got me thinking about playing and breathing at the same time in general. So obviously the first thing I did was a Google search, which turned up relatively little, particularly in regard to stringed instruments. Obviously, if you play any kind of wind instrument, breathing is integral to its technique and therefore directly addressed. But if you play a stringed instrument, rarely is it ever mentioned. And the same can be said for the piano and other percussion instruments. I then questioned a few of my musician mates, and none of those could remember ever being taught anything on this or ever being mentioned. Because now I was more conscious of this aspect of technique, I started noticing bad habits in mine and my students playing. I, for instance, have a tendency to hold my breath whilst playing long improvised phrases, and it turns out I'm not alone in this. Other musicians I spoke to said they did the same thing. Obviously, this is not a great habit to have. In all other aspects of instrumental technique, we aim to be as relaxed as possible and avoid tension of any kind. It therefore follows that if our breathing technique is not optimal, when presented with challenging environments such as that gig, we're going to struggle. Now, although you may have no specific problems in this area, I urge you to give some of the following exercises a try. Because this is something we don't give much, if any, conscious thought to, it's all too easy to fall into bad habits without realising. And a little goes a long way when it comes to prevention. So just try these and then be a little bit mindful of your breathing. It might make all the difference. So the first thing we're going to do is use the metronome to regulate our breathing. I've set up my metronome here on my phone in the following way. I've got it set to 50 BPM and with a time signature of 6/4. And this allows us to have two equal halves of a bar, thusly. Now this metronome lets you have certain beats playing and certain ones not. So we've just got that long beat. I'm going to inhale on one and exhale on the other, like so. Like so. Now, one thing you may notice is the tendency for the exhalation to be a lot quicker than the inhalation. You sort of draw breath up and then, there's more of a pressure on it to exhale. So just try and even the inhalation and exhalation up, so they're as even as you can make it. And then from there, find the tempo, play around with the tempo to find something that makes sense or feels right to you. So you're not trying to take in, you're not trying to hyperventilate, you're not trying to take in huge, great lungfuls of air, just long, slow, deep breaths, but like that. So you're not over breathing. And obviously just do that for 5-10 minutes just to kind of get into that conscious awareness of what you're doing with your breath control. Okay. So now we're going to start aligning our playing with our breathing. Beginning very simply, we're going to play one chord on the inhalation and another on the exhalation. So find two familiar chord shapes that you can go back and forth from without any great mental effort, something your fingers know and are familiar with. It doesn't really matter what they are at this point. So on the inhalation, you play the first chord, and then as you breathe out, move to the second chord and play that on the slight pause at the end of it, at the exhalation. So these beats, even though you're going to be using the metronome, are what we might think of as soft beats. There's no need to be completely metronomic. So that's the first thing to do. So it looks something like this. So there you have it, a basic application of that idea. It could be further developed, of course. You could go and play two chords on each inhalation and exhalation, all the while maintaining a steady flow of breath through the nose and staying relaxed. And of course, I referred to wind instrument players at the top of this video, and this is what they do all day long. So as guitarists, we have it pretty easy, I think. Part 3, applying this to some music. For this, you'll need a piece that you're already familiar with and that requires minimal mental effort to play. I've chosen a piece by Kreutzer that I've been doing for decades, and therefore should be a focus on playing the thing whilst being more conscious of my breathing. As it turns out, this is harder than I thought, as the fluffs will testify. What I'm looking to do here is not align the rhythm of my breathing to the rhythm of the piece, because obviously, you know, we have great variance in tempo. You don't really trying to breathe at something that's 180 beats per minute, or likewise slow, and it'd be unnecessarily distracting to do so. So what I am aiming to do is to keep a steady flow of inhalation and exhalation, somewhat independent of the rhythm of the piece. So it's steady and even throughout the piece, regardless of what's going on musically. Because again, dynamics will play into this. If it gets louder, are we going to start breathing harder? If it gets quieter, are we going to breathe less? No, we want consistency, regardless of what we're doing. Now, as I say, and as you'll see from the example I've just recorded, this is harder to do than I thought. And obviously, when you're playing, you're not going to be thinking about this. So this is a training exercise. You're looking to build that muscle, as it were, so that, you know, when needs must, the resources are there for you, like anything we do. So check this out and have a go for yourself with something that you know already. It could be anything, really. I've chosen the Kreutzer because I say it's under my fingers, but as you'll see, one or two fluffs there, tricky, harder than it looks. Try it. Great, so there's a few ideas to develop your breathing control whilst playing. Hopefully they're helpful. If they have been, please like, subscribe and comment below. Let me know your experiences and any tips or techniques that you know of. So, and may the 4th be with you. See you.